Hello everybody, how are you all keeping? Hope you're keeping well. I know things are maybe a bit weird and a bit strange and definitely different at the minute, but I hope everybody's keeping well and keeping themselves occupied. So my name's Jack Warnock and I'm a guitar player and singer from Hare in County Derry. So not too far up the road from here in Studio 2, and yeah, I'm going to be doing a workshop today on guitar. So this is sort of, I suppose, geared towards more intermediate advanced players, but yeah, we'll see how we get on throughout the course of the day. So I have a couple of different things that I want to look at, and I suppose the first thing that I want to maybe just chat about a bit is tuning. So a lot of people will probably start in standard tuning, and then maybe some people will be playing in dadgad tuning, and then there's my tuning of choice, drop D. So I thought I would just give a quick kind of overview over what those are and maybe show you some drop D chords, because that's the tuning that I use most of the time, along with some other guitar players that I really admire. So starting off, you've got standard tuning. Got my little tuner off to the side here. So standard tuning, that's the tuning that most people tend to use, where you've got, you know, wee chords like that for your D, that's your G, that's your A, and so on. That's the tuning that most people tend to run with. There's a reason why it's called standard tuning. So moving on from that, I'll talk a bit about dadgad. So the notes in standard tuning go E on your top string, your sixth string, E, A, D, G, B, E. So when you change to dadgad, which I'll do very quickly here, the notes literally do what they say in the tin. So in dadgad tuning, now this is a rough approximation of dadgad, it's probably a bit out. It's close enough. So in dadgad tuning, your notes actually go from the very top, they go D, A, D, G, A, D. So dad, gad, just like that. And for anybody that's used dadgad tuning before, you'll know that the chords are maybe a bit simpler than they would be in say something like standard tuning, at least to start off with. As with, you know, any tuning on the guitar, there are easy chords and there are hard chords, but your kind of basic ones are pretty straightforward, and most of them don't even need more than, you know, one or two fingers. So your D in dadgad is here, where you've got your first finger on the fourth string, the G string, at the second fret, and you strum through everything. You've got that. Then say your G chord, there's a few different ways of playing these, by the way, but the way that I play it is with my ring finger on the fifth fret at the top string, and my middle finger on the G string, the fourth string, at the fourth fret. And then to play an A chord, you can just slide that up 2 frets. So that's a quick look at sort of D, G, and A in dadgad tuning. But you can hear what's really nice about dadgad is that you've got these last 2 strings ringing out. So it sort of has this, it's nearly kind of like a drone that keeps ringing out across all of the strings. So everything sort of, it has the same tone to it, you know. It's not like in standard tuning where everything sounds quite different. And now if I take up to our last tuning. So if you remember, our standard tuning was E, A, D, G, B, E. In drop D tuning, all that we do is we take the top string, which was an E, and we drop it to a D note. So now you've got D, A, D, G, B, E. So drop D kind of sits halfway between dadgad tuning and standard tuning, which is what I quite like it for, because it has a couple of the advantages of both of them. So if you play a D in standard tuning, you'll skip out the top 2 strings, so it sounds like this. And sometimes it'll maybe sound a bit kind of weedy because of that. Versus if I play all 6 strings like you can do in drop D, your D sounds like this. So instantly you can notice that there's a big difference. You've got all that nice low end, all that nice bass coming out. So just a quick second to check tuning, seeing as I've been going all over the place. And now I'll show you a few of the different chords that I use when I'm playing in drop D. So if you're coming from standard, these might seem quite stretchy. If you're coming from dadgad tuning, these are probably not too far off of what you're used to, but you might just need a few more fingers. And if you're already playing in drop D, then you're in for a great time. So if you're playing in drop D, the easiest way to look at it is that any chord that doesn't use the top string, you can play exactly the same. So say for example your D chord, we wouldn't use the top 2 strings in standard tuning, so you can play it like that. We'll have a look at Ds because there are a lot of different ways of playing D in drop D tuning, and some of them I like a bit more than others, but that's personal preference. So chords like C, which don't use the top string in standard tuning, are exactly the same. We don't have to use them. Like that. Or A minor is another one. It's just the same. So it's quite easy to make the transition from standard tuning to drop D. Now, if we're talking about your D chord to start off with, usually we play it like this in standard tuning. So that's with your first finger on the G string at the 2nd fret. Then your middle finger is on the last string at the 2nd fret. And your ring finger goes on the 5th string at the 3rd fret. So that's in between them, in between the other 2. And then you've got this. Another way of playing that, which is maybe a bit more drop D-like, is if we take our first finger. This can be a bit tricky if you've never done a bar chord at all, where you take your first finger and we're going to cover the bottom 3 strings all at once at the 2nd fret. So that would just sound like this to start off with. And then we're going to put our middle finger on the 3rd fret of the B string. So that's the 5th string. And then you've got this. So what we're actually doing there is we're covering the same frets as our normal D chord, but we're using less fingers to do that. It just means that we've now freed up these 2 fingers so they can stretch and we can do all sorts of crazy things, whereas before it wasn't just as easy to stretch. You know, I can stretch up maybe to the 5th fret from a standard D shape. However, if I use this one, I could probably stretch right up to the 7th fret at a pinch. I'd never play that because it would sound weird, but just to know that you can stretch, and it's a bit easier to stretch and hit those higher frets. So another D chord that I use quite often is this one, which is your first finger on the 2nd fret of the G string, your middle finger on the 3rd fret of the B string, and then my pinky finger on the 5th fret of the high E, the last string. And you strum right through every single string there. So that's a D chord that I'll use quite regularly. So before we maybe go and take a look at playing a tune, we need to cover 2 more chords at least. So we need to cover our G chord, which I play like this. So your first finger should cover the last 2 strings at the 3rd fret. So it should sound like that. Then your ring finger is going to come up to the top string at the 5th fret. And a little tip with that, I don't know if you can see this, but my ring finger there, this one, is just touching the top of the next string. And that means that the next string will be muted, so it won't make any noise really, and it'll sound something like this. That just means that when we play all the strings, we won't hear the 2nd string. So that's how your G chord sounds. Now if I were to say hold my finger so that you can hear the 2nd string, it would sound like this. That doesn't sound very nice, those 2 notes together. So we want to get that little mute going. It's much cleaner. So again, that's your first finger on the last 2 strings at the 3rd fret, and your ring finger on the 5th fret of the 1st string, just touching the 2nd one. So we're not pushing down on it. We don't want to hear anything like that. We're holding it up still quite nice and tall. It's not going back on itself like that. We're still holding it up nice and tall, but it's just touching that next string. So we've got that. And then for our A chord, if you're coming from standard tuning, it's just, you can use this one as well, which is your first finger on the 2nd fret of the 3rd string, the D string, your middle finger on the 2nd fret of the 4th string, the G string, and your 3rd finger on the 2nd fret again of the 5th string, the B string. So I kind of commonly call this the finger sandwich, because everything's packed in nice and tight there. Another way of playing that is if you want to, this is a bit harder, but you can do this. You can take your first finger, cover those 3 strings at the 2nd fret all at once, only if I show you from this angle, you kind of lift your finger up after the first joint on it. So you see how you've got, on your finger, you've got a few different joints. You've got your first one, your second one there, and then your knuckle. So at your first joint, the finger would bend itself back a wee bit. Now again, this can be kind of difficult, so don't be too fussed about this if you're having trouble with it. But they sound exactly the same. It's just that sometimes the one finger version can be a bit quicker to get to, and it's a little bit less fiddly once you get used to it, but only once you get used to it. But it just means that you can quickly change. So say if I was playing D, G, D, and then A, you can see how easy that change is in comparison to say going, I have to kind of move my whole hand. In fact, I nearly have to move most of my arm, where before I was just doing this. That's the change between a D and an A if you're using the one finger. And if you're using 3 fingers, you can see it just takes that wee bit more energy and a wee bit more movement in your arm. But anyways, that's not a be all and end all situation. So we're going to have a look at a few tunes today. The first of which is called Sailor on the Rock. So this is a nice sort of straightforward little tune in D. This is a reel, so we'll have a look at what rhythm you would play for the reels, and then we'll also have a look at the chords that you use. So I've done notes out for this tune, and I've just used the 3-chord trick, as I call them. It's kind of commonly known as the 3-chord trick, and that's the idea that when you're playing in whatever key, so say if you're playing a tune in the key of D, you can use 3 chords that will more or less always at least sound mostly right. Well, there are a couple of extra chords we can add in, but we'll come to them later on. So the 3 chords that we'll be using are D, G and A, which we've just run over, so that's great. And I feel the need to point out at this stage that if you're using standard tuning, if you're using drop D, if you're using dadgad, if you're using some other random tuning that I haven't talked about, then I'll just be calling out, D, G, A, and you can totally use whichever version of those tunes or chords in whatever tuning to play along. I'll be using the drop D versions, but you can use whatever you're comfortable with. So I'll give the tune a play over for you, and I'll see how it goes. And then we'll have a little talk about the rhythm of it and about the chords that we're going to use in it. So, without further ado, here is The Sailor on the Rock. No, can't play it now. So that's the tune, very, very roughly once through, just as an example. And again, I'm going to check my tuning because we tune because we care. So that's the tune. As you can hear, reels are pretty straightforward is maybe not the right word, but they're very sort of steady. I always think of reels and the rhythm for reels as being kind of like a train. It just keeps chugging. So the motion for it is really, really straightforward. We're basically just going to be going down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, and rinse and repeat over and over again. So you've got down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down. So say we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Usually we'll put a bit of emphasis onto a strum whenever we change chord. So one thing that I've kind of been picking up very recently from teaching and giving lessons and things is the tendency for people maybe sometimes to naturally go into a rhythm and go 1, 2, 3, 4, dum dum ba da 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 ba da 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 ba da da dum dum, and kind of do like 1 and 2 and put a bit of emphasis on that and. We don't have to do that. In fact, I find usually for reels it's quite nice if we don't do that. That said, it's lovely to have a bit of variation in your playing. So I'm not kind of saying that you can't play that at all, but just that sometimes it's nice to change up your rhythm and things like that. So say if I were to play D, G and A few times, and I might go 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So you can hear that 2, 4, 1 and 2, 3, 4. You can definitely hear that dum dum rhythm going on there, and we don't have to do that every time. So now I'll play just the same thing, but I'll only push on the first beat. I'm not pushing that little and after. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4. So you should get a bit of a sense of how that's very kind of direct sounding. And what I'll do now is I'll play the 2 into each other, and then we can actually have a look at the tune. It's only taken 20 minutes. Great. So you've got from the very, very start, say if I were to do that 1 and 2 and then I'll do that 1, 2, 3, where you don't put that little bit of emphasis on after. So I'll do it a bit faster as well because it's easier to hear. So the first time you've got this. And if I take that emphasis out, and back in. And back out. So that's just a quick look at kind of how we can really easily change the rhythm of a reel. And that can be quite nice if you use one in the first tune in a set, if you're backing some melody players, and say you use a different rhythm in the second tune of a set, then use a different one in the third tune, and so on. It helps make a bit of a difference throughout the set. Instead of just changing your chords and you know, playing along with different tunes, you're actually changing the rhythm, and you can really change the sound of a tune. So say if you had versus so that's a quick run through the rhythm and things anyways. So we'll have a look at the tune now. There's very little actually in it chord wise. So in a tune like this, we really want to kind of drive the rhythm home and keep everything nice and steady. If you're thinking, if a melody player is playing the tune, you want to be able to kind of back them up. And sort of make everything that they are playing sound a bit nicer. Yeah, so really we've got D for 3 beats and then A for 1. So you've got 1, 2, 3, A. So you've got D, 2, 3, A. And then the same thing for the next wee bar. So you've got 1, 2, 3, A. And the same thing for the next bar. 1, 2, 3, A. And the same thing for the next bar. Nice and straightforward. 1, 2, 3, 4. So if we maybe try doing that whole bar just once through. Now this tune is a single tune, so that means you only play the first part once, where usually we would repeat the first part and then repeat the second part. We're just going to go straight through. So you've got 1, 2, 3 and A to D, 2, 3 and A, D, 2, 3 and A, D, 2, 3 and A, and okay. So I think we can keep going with that second part, and then we can come back and put the whole thing together. So the way I've got it written now is that you're going to do D for 2 and then G for 2. So you've got 1, 2, G, 2, D for 2, and then A for 2. Then take and repeat that. So you've got D for 2, G for 2, D for 2, and A for 2. Okay. So just one more time we'll give that whole second part a run right through. So after 3, 4 and D, G, 1, 2 and D, A, and D, 2, G, 4 and D, finish that on D. So overall, you've got 1, 2, 3. So we can maybe give that a run right through the whole tune. So for your first part, you're doing 3 beats of D and 1 beat of A, and we do that 4 times over. And then in the second part, we do D for 2, G for 2, D for 2, A for 2, and do that over once more. So let's give it a little go. So you've got just as a little reminder of how the tune starts. So I'll try and hum the tune and probably do an awful job of it, but these are the things we have to suffer with when I can't have another musician in here to play a tune for me. So let's give it a go. So 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3 and A, D, 2, 3 and A, and D, 2, 3, A, D, A, D, G, D, 1, 2 and A, 4 and D, 2 and G, 4 and D, 2 and A, 4 and. Let's do that whole tune over one more time, but maybe a bit faster. And if you want to go over it a bit slower, obviously you can just put this video back a bit. So let's give it a go. So 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, A, G, D, A, D, G, D, A. So let's give it one more run over, just even a hair quicker than that. So you've got. Yeah. Yeah, let's give it a go. About that kind of speed. So after 1, 2, 3, 4. D, 2, 3, A, D, 2, 3, A, D, 2, 3, A, D, 2, 3, G, D, A, D, G, D, A, and finish. So we'll maybe have a look at that again in a moment, but for now I think we'll have a quick look over the second tune that I've got on this sheet. So this is a tune called the Hare's Paw, and again it's another little single reel. So it's a fun tune because it's kind of, you can match the chords up quite nicely with the tune, and as well this is a tune in G, so we're going to have a look at the chords in the key of G, and also have a look at some extra chords that you can put in whenever you're playing in a certain key. So if we've got I play the tune for you first, or at least I will try, and we'll see how that goes, but it should be okay. So this is the Hare's Paw. So, as I say, that's a tune in G, and it's just another reel. So what we can do is we can actually pair these two tunes up and we can play them one into the other. So, if we've got your key of G, we can have a look at, first off, you remember I was talking about the 3-chord trick earlier. So those are the 3 chords that will probably allow us to be able to play most tunes in that key, whatever key it is. You know, and we can play these 3 chords and sort of get away with most of it. There might be the odd time when we'll have to jump and use an extra chord or whatever like that. But for the most part, we can use those chords. And obviously, when we're in the key of G, our first chord in that 3-chord trick is going to be G. So we've looked at the G before in drop D. If you're in standard tuning, then it's something like this, where you've got your ring finger at the bottom, your middle finger at the top, both at the 3rd fret, and then your first finger on the A fret, or sorry, the A string at the 2nd fret. So, and then if you're in dadgad, it's something like that, or there's another version of something like this. But that's our G chord, so we've looked at that one. In drop D, it was the first finger, first finger, last 2 strings at the 3rd fret, and then your ring finger up at the top at the 5th fret, just touching the 2nd string, so it makes that noise there, that little mute. So you've got that. So that's your G. Your C chord, lucky enough for any standard players out there, it's exactly the same as standard tuning. So for anyone else, we'll just run through it and just to be sure. So what you're going to do, you're going to take your first finger and put it on the 1st fret of the 5th string. So that's the 2nd last string. Then you're going to take your middle finger, your 2nd finger, and put it on the 2nd fret of the 3rd string, the D string. Then your ring finger, or your 3rd finger, at the 3rd fret of the 2nd string, the A string. So the way I always kind of remember exactly where to put my fingers is that your first finger goes in the 1st fret, your 2nd finger goes in the 2nd fret, and your 3rd finger goes in the 3rd fret. Then we don't play the top string, or you can either just not play it, like this, or what I tend to do is I take my thumb up, and just like we were doing in the G chord, it just sits and touches the top string, so that when we hit the top string, it sounds like this. And it doesn't really make a noise, so that if you accidentally strum that string, you're not going to hear, you know, all this lovely awfulness, I suppose. So this is what it sounds like if you play the top string. You can hear it doesn't sound quite right, but if I mute that string or just don't play it, it sounds like this. Much nicer. So we need a G chord, a C chord, and a D chord. So we've already lifted the D as well. Like that, or there are multiple other versions up and down the neck, all over the place. So yeah, they're all the same chord. So those are our first 3 chords. The other 2 that we need for this tune are your A minor and your E minor. So one of these, the A minor, I always treat it, if you go to a C and then take your ring finger off and put it now on the 2nd fret of the G string, the 4th string, and that's your A minor. Same strings and everything, so we don't play the top string. So that's just your little change from C. Take off the 3rd finger and into the 2nd fret of the G string. That's the 4th string. Okay, so you've got that. And then your E minor. So in standard, your E minor looks like this, with the 2nd fret on the A and the D string. If you're in drop D, what I tend to do is take my middle finger and bar the top 3 strings at the 2nd fret. I wonder, can I show that to the camera? Just about. And again, my finger just sort of pivots up so that the next string is open. My middle finger isn't touching the 4th string, the G string. And that sounds like this. An easy way out of that is you can play with 3 fingers, just the 2nd fret on the top of the 3 strings, like that. So that is your E minor chord. And there's one extra kind of chord that we can put in just for a bit of flavour, and that's what you call a G/B or a G over B. So the easiest way to think of it is that it's a G chord, but instead of having a G as our bass note like we do here, that's a G. We're now going to have a G chord, but with a B note as our bass note. So the way we play that is like this. With your pinky finger on the last string at the 3rd fret, your ring finger on the string above that at the 3rd fret, and then on the 2nd string you're going to have your 1st finger at the 2nd fret. We don't play the top string for this chord, and you get this. So you can probably hear the slight difference between G and G over B. Yeah. So those are all the chords that we need for this tune. It's a bit more complicated, it kind of moves around a bit more with the chords. If I just run back to the tune for a quick second to kind of talk about where the chords go. The chords are basically following the tune. You'll always find that with your chords when you're accompanying someone playing a melody. So say if we have... There are certain notes out there that really stand out to me and that make me kind of go, oh yeah, it'd be nice to change chord at that stage. So say you have da da da. If I play a G chord over that, that doesn't sound quite right. Da da da. Doesn't sound all that amazing. So what we might do is change to something like an A minor, like what I've got written there. So the note in the tune is, it's an A note in the tune. So if I go to an A minor, that should work out. Let's try it. So we've got da da da, which sounds pretty good. And then we go da 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 da. That doesn't sound great now. So we know that we need to change chord again. And for this time, I'm going to go to an E minor. So far in that first bar, we've got G, A minor, and then E minor. Okay, and then in the next bar, I've put in G. So you got 1 and 2 and 3, 4. G for 2 and C for 2. So those first 2 bars, you've got G, A minor, E minor, G, C. Okay, the next little bar is the same as the first one. So you've got G, A minor, E minor. And the next bar is slightly different. So what we're going to do is go G, 2, and the G over B chord, 1, and C for 1. So again, that last bar goes like this. 1, 2, 3, and 4. And just the same thing one more time. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so let's maybe try giving that whole first part a quick run through. So you've got 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And G, 2, C, 3, 4. And G, A minor, E minor, 4. And G over B, C. And again, because this is a single reel, we only play the first part once and then we go straight into the second part. So one quick wee pointer as well. If you're having trouble with the A minors, you can actually play a D chord there instead. So you remember I said that we can play an A minor chord because the note there is an A in the actual tune. So if I take a D chord and play it, and I play it one string at a time, you'll notice that we have that A note sitting in there. So I can match up the A note that I'm playing in the melody with the A note in the chord, such as either A minor or a D chord. See, you can hear that one note ringing out. So we could either use the A minor in the first bar and go G, A minor, E minor. Or I could use a D chord instead. So if you're having trouble with the A minor, then you can totally use a D chord. And even if you want to, you can use the D chord as a variation. You know, say if you were to play it, if you played the tune round twice, the first time you play the tune, maybe you use the D chord, and then the second time you use the A minor. Or vice versa. You know, you can swap them kind of whenever you want. So in the second part, it's a bit more straightforward. So we've got E minor and D. And they're just for 2 bars, or 2 beats each. So you've got 1, 2, 3, 4. Then we've got E minor to G over B to C. So that goes 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's your E minor, G over B, C. Then the next bar is the same as the first, so that's E minor for 2, D for 2. 1, 2, 3, 4. Then we go to C for 2, E minor for 1, D for 1. So that's C, 2, E minor, D, and we would finish on G. Either finish on G, or that's the G that's back in the first part, into your A part again. So just that whole second part sounds like this. 1, 2. 2 and D, E minor, G over B, C, E minor, D, C, E minor, D, and G to finish. So that, let's try playing through the whole tune once, just a bit slower like that. Okay, so we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, A minor, E minor. 4, G. 1, 2, and C. 1, 4, G, A minor, E minor, G, G over B, C. Second part, E minor, D, E minor, G over B, C, E minor, D, C, E minor, D, and G to finish. Okay? So let's try doing that whole tune once over again, but we'll maybe try it a bit faster this time. So, yeah, something like that. So, and a 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, A minor, G, C, G, A minor, E minor, So let's try it one more time over, but maybe even a bit faster again. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and G, A minor, E minor, G, C, G, A minor, E minor, G over B, C, E minor, D, E minor, G over B, C, G, E minor, sorry, D, C, E minor to D. Okay. So, let's maybe try and put the two tunes together at a sort of moderate pace. So that's the Sailor on the Rock. And Hare's Paw. So we'll try and put the two of those together now. So we're going to start on the Sailor of the Rock and then go straight into the Hare's Paw after one time round. So here goes. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 2, 2, 3, A, D, A, D, A, D, A, D, G, D, A, D, G, D, A, and into our next tune, so G, G, A minor, E minor, G, C, G, A minor, E minor, G, G over B, C, E minor, D, E minor, G over B, C, E minor, D, C, E minor, D, G to finish. So let me see. As an example, I'll maybe run through just the accompaniment part, kind of pretty lifty, up to speed. I'll maybe do each tune twice, just so you can kind of hear how it sounds, and then what I'll do to finish off, I'll play the two tunes into each other, sort of moderate pace, so that you can try actually play it along with the tune and follow the chords yourself. So yeah, we'll see how that goes. But first off, I'll do a quick example of just the accompaniment end of things. So that'll be going just the chords. So first tune twice, and then the second tune twice. So here it goes. And I'll try and maybe do a bit of that variation in rhythm that I was talking about towards the start, where you've got the dum da 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 dum da 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 dum da, and maybe some bits where you've got da 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 da, you know, so you can kind of hear the difference. So I'll give it a go. Here goes. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, So that's a quick run just at kind of how the accompaniment sounds. I'm sort of listening to the tune in my head while I'm doing that to hear where some of the rhythmy bits and things are going. So I'll play the melody of both tunes for you now. I'll maybe play each tune twice at a sort of moderate pace, and that'll do us for this workshop. So, quick tune because I'm very considerate. It's also quite warm in here. So let's see. Yeah, I'll give this a run through. So this is the Sailor on the Rock twice, and then the Hare's Paw twice, and you can try and follow along with this with the chords. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Hare's Paw. So, I hope you've all enjoyed that little workshop, and I hope it's been of some use to you all. If anybody has any questions, you can find me on Facebook at Jack Warnock Music, or you can get me over email and fire any questions on or whatever at jwarnockmusic@gmail.com. But otherwise, I want to thank everybody for clicking in and watching, and I hope that you've got something out of it, be that about rhythm, be that about chords, be that about tunings, whatever. But yeah, I hope you all enjoyed. So thanks very much. Cheers.